The sound of the slap echoed through first class. Olivia Bennett's cheek stung as the flight attendant towered over her, smirking. "Your kind doesn't belong here," she whispered. Little did Patricia know she'd just assaulted the woman who signed her paychecks, and owned the entire airline. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination in action. The moment this flight attendant realized who she just slapped will leave you speechless. Stay tuned to see how one woman's quiet power turned the tables on racism at 30,000 feet. Long before Olivia Bennett found herself in the crosshairs of a prejudiced flight attendant, she was just a girl with big dreams growing up in the unforgiving streets of Harlem. Her mother, Eleanor, worked 3 jobs. Cleaning offices at dawn, serving lunch at a school cafeteria, and taking night shifts at a hospital. Despite the exhaustion etched into the lines of her face, Eleanor always told young Olivia, "Your mind is the one thing they can never take from you." Olivia's exceptional intelligence became evident when she was just 5 years old. Her kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Williams, noticed how quickly she absorbed information, solving math problems meant for children twice her age. But this gift came with a burden in a world that often viewed black excellence with suspicion rather than celebration. "She must be cheating," Olivia overheard one teacher say to another after she scored perfectly on a standardized test in 3rd grade. The accusation cut deep, but instead of breaking her spirit, it forged her determination. That night, she told her mother what happened. "Baby," Eleanor said, wiping away her daughter's tears, "you'll need to be twice as good to get half as far. That's just how it is. But you are brilliant enough to do it." And she was. By 14, Olivia had skipped 2 grades and earned a prestigious scholarship to Westfield Academy, an elite private high school where wealthy parents paid tuition equivalent to college fees. Among the sea of privileged white faces, Olivia stood out, not just for her skin color, but for her academic prowess. "You must be here on the diversity scholarship," remarked Charlotte Monroe, a classmate whose father owned a banking empire, on Olivia's first day. The words were wrapped in a veneer of politeness, but the implication was clear: you don't belong here on merit alone. Olivia didn't waste energy confronting such microaggressions. Instead, she channeled her focus into becoming valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to MIT where she double-majored in computer science and business administration. College brought new challenges and the same old prejudices. Group projects often meant being overlooked or having her ideas attributed to white male classmates. During her junior year internship at a tech firm, a supervisor patted her on the head, literally, and said, "You're pretty articulate for a girl from your background." These experiences could have embittered her. Instead, they sharpened her vision. While her peers dreamed of joining established tech giants, Olivia identified a gap in the market: real-time language translation software that could bridge communication divides globally. Working through nights and weekends in her tiny apartment, she developed the first prototype of what would become Translate Now. After graduation, the real battle began. Venture capital firms were notoriously unwelcoming to black women entrepreneurs. In one particularly demoralizing meeting, an investor interrupted her pitch to ask if there was someone technical on her team, assuming she was just the face of the operation rather than its brain. "I wrote every line of code in this prototype," she replied calmly, before walking out. For 18 months, door after door closed in her face. Olivia took consulting jobs to keep the lights on while refining her software. The breakthrough came when Dr. Raymond Chen, a professor from MIT who had recognized her talent, introduced her to Vernon Williams, one of the few black venture capitalists in Silicon Valley. "I don't need to be convinced about your brilliance," Vernon said after she demonstrated the software. "I just need to know you have the stomach for what's coming." Success as a black woman in tech means wearing armor every day. With Vernon's seed investment, Bennett Technologies was born. The first year was a struggle of 18-hour days, ramen noodle dinners, and constant doubt from industry analysts. When Translate Now launched, critics called it ambitious but flawed. Olivia took the criticism, improved the algorithm, and relaunched 6 months later. This time, the world noticed. TranslateNow's accuracy surpassed every competitor, and its intuitive interface made it accessible to users of all technical abilities. Within 3 years, Bennett Technologies had secured contracts with international diplomatic corps, global corporations, and educational institutions worldwide. As success grew, Olivia maintained a deliberately low profile. No flashy parties or magazine covers, her focus remained on innovation and excellence. She expanded thoughtfully, acquiring complementary technologies and hiring diverse talent often overlooked by other tech companies. By 35, Olivia Bennett had quietly amassed a fortune exceeding $11 billion, though few outside industry insiders could recognize her face. Her philosophy was simple: I don't need to be seen. I need to be effective. This principle guided her unusual approach to new acquisitions. Rather than announcing purchases with press releases and parties, she preferred to observe operations from within before implementing changes. Which is exactly why, when the opportunity to purchase struggling Horizon Airlines appeared, Olivia saw more than a business opportunity. She saw a chance to transform an industry known for poor customer service and discriminatory practices. The acquisition was conducted through layers of holding companies, allowing her to remain anonymous to most Horizon employees. I want to experience what our customers experience, she told her small circle of executives. No special treatment, no announcements. Just a first-class ticket like any other passenger. As she packed her carry-on for what should have been a routine cross-country flight, Olivia had no idea that this decision would set in motion events that would not only change her life but potentially transform an entire industry's approach to racial equity. The morning of the flight dawned bright and clear in New York. Olivia had chosen this specific Horizon Airlines flight to San Francisco for strategic reasons. She was scheduled to deliver the keynote address at Tech Forward, Silicon Valley's most prestigious annual conference. Her speech would unveil Bennett Technologies' newest innovation, an AI system designed to identify and mitigate bias in automated decision-making processes. The irony wasn't lost on her as she prepared for the journey that would later expose very human bias in action. Olivia dressed as she always did, practically but with quiet elegance. Her charcoal gray pantsuit was expertly tailored but not flashy, her natural hair styled in a simple updo. The only hint of luxury was her watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that had been her first significant purchase after Bennett Technologies went public. It was her reminder of time's value, how quickly it could be wasted on others' prejudices. She could have taken her private jet, of course. The sleek Gulfstream G650 sat ready at a private airfield outside the city. But that would defeat the purpose of her undercover mission to assess Horizon's customer experience firsthand. "Are you sure about this, Liv?" her chief of staff, Zara Washington, had questioned the previous evening. "Commercial flights are unpredictable. We could arrange for you to review the data without subjecting yourself to the actual experience." Olivia had smiled. "Data tells you what happened, Zara. It doesn't tell you how it felt." Now, as her town car pulled up to Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport, she reminded herself of her dual purpose: gather first-hand experience of her airline service and arrive in San Francisco ready to deliver a speech that could change the tech industry's approach to ethical AI. The departure hall bustled with morning travelers. Olivia joined the first-class check-in line, her understated carry-on and briefcase containing nothing more suspicious than her laptop and conference materials. The white couple ahead of her were greeted with warm smiles by the ticketing agent, Gregory, who joked pleasantly about the California weather as he processed their boarding passes. When Olivia stepped forward, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Ticket and ID," Gregory stated flatly, not bothering to make eye contact. Olivia presented her documentation along with the premium customer card she'd been issued as a first-class passenger. Gregory studied her California driver's license with unusual scrutiny, glancing repeatedly between the photo and her face as if suspecting forgery. "Is there a problem?" Olivia asked. "Just doing my job, ma'am," Gregory replied, emphasizing the last word with subtle contempt. First time flying first class with us. The implication was clear. People like you don't typically fly first class. Olivia had encountered this assumption countless times before, at luxury boutiques, fine restaurants, and hotel lobbies. The presumption that black success was anomalous rather than earned. I've flown first class many times, she responded evenly, refusing to elaborate or justify her presence in the premium line. With visible reluctance, Gregory issued her boarding pass. Security is that way, he said, pointing vaguely across the terminal rather than providing the detailed directions he'd given the previous passengers. Olivia made a mental note of the interaction, the first data point in her customer experience assessment. As she approached the security checkpoint, she observed how TSA agents interacted with different passengers. A white businessman sailed through with a cursory ID check despite his oversized carry-on. An elderly Asian couple received patient assistance with the scanning trays. When Olivia's turn came, the agent signaled to a colleague. Random additional screening, he announced, though nothing about the selection appeared random. Olivia was directed to step aside while a female officer prepared to conduct a pat-down. Is this really necessary? Olivia asked, noting that no other first-class passengers had been selected for this treatment. Ma'am, we don't make the rules, we just enforce them, the agent replied with practiced neutrality. Arms out, please. As the agent's hands moved methodically across her body, Olivia maintained her composure, though her mind was racing. This wasn't just about her personal dignity, it was evidence of systemic issues she'd need to address throughout Horizon's operations. 20 minutes later, cleared to proceed, Olivia made her way to the premium lounge. Her first-class ticket granted her access to this exclusive space with its complimentary refreshments, comfortable seating, and business facilities. As she settled into a quiet corner with a cup of green tea, she opened her laptop to review her keynote presentation. I can't believe they let just anyone in here these days, came a stage whisper from a nearby seating area. I pay good money for exclusivity. Olivia didn't look up, but her fingers paused over the keyboard. She was well practiced at appearing not to hear such comments. The voices continued, not bothering to lower their volume. Probably using points or some promotion, another voice chimed in. The real question is how she got enough points for first class. Housekeeping must pay better than I thought. A ripple of laughter followed. Olivia remained focused on her screen, her face betraying nothing of the mental notes she was adding to her growing list of customer experience issues to address. The boarding announcement came as a welcome interruption. Gathering her belongings, Olivia proceeded to Gate 32 where Horizon Flight 1547 to San Francisco was preparing for departure. As a first-class passenger, she was entitled to priority boarding. It was here she first encountered Patricia Wilson. Patricia stood at the gate podium, her Horizon Airlines uniform impeccably pressed, blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun beneath her regulation cap. At 52, she had been with the airline for 27 years, rising from junior flight attendant to senior cabin service director on the most prestigious transcontinental routes. Her personnel file, which Olivia had not yet reviewed, contained numerous commendations for customer service excellence alongside several unaddressed complaints from passengers of color. Boarding passes, please, Patricia announced with professional brightness as the first-class passengers assembled. When Olivia presented her boarding pass, Patricia's smile dimmed noticeably. Her eyes flicked from the document to Olivia's face and back again. There must be some mistake, Patricia said, her voice carrying enough to draw attention from nearby passengers. This is the first-class boarding line. Yes, I'm aware, Olivia replied calmly. As you can see from my boarding pass, I'm in seat 2A. First class. Patricia examined the boarding pass again with exaggerated care. It seems to be in order, she conceded with obvious reluctance. Though these systems do make errors sometimes. Is there some problem with my ticket? Olivia asked directly. Patricia's smile returned, tight and insincere. Not at all. Enjoy your flight, miss. The pause before the last word was subtle but unmistakable. As Olivia moved past her onto the jet bridge, she heard Patricia cheerfully greeting the white male passenger behind her. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. We're so pleased to have you with us today." Boarding the aircraft, Olivia was greeted by another flight attendant who directed her to her seat with professional courtesy. The first-class cabin was appointed with spacious leather seats, individual entertainment systems, and ample storage. Olivia stowed her briefcase and settled in, mentally shifting gears from the uncomfortable interactions to focus on evaluating the cabin design and amenities. All elements she would soon have the authority to improve. Through the cabin doorway, she could see Patricia finishing the boarding process, chatting warmly with several white passengers as they entered. When Patricia finally stepped aboard and began her first-class cabin preparations, her eyes landed on Olivia with poorly concealed surprise, as if she'd hoped the black woman in 2A might have somehow disappeared during boarding. Olivia returned her gaze steadily, then turned to look out the window as the ground crew completed their preparations. She could feel tension building like a low-pressure system before a storm. And as the aircraft doors closed and the safety demonstration began, Olivia Bennett, tech genius, billionaire, and unbeknownst to anyone aboard, the new owner of Horizon Airlines, prepared herself for what would prove to be the most revealing flight of her life. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Olivia settled into her spacious first-class seat, discreetly observing the operations of her newly acquired airline. She pulled out a small notebook, jotting down initial impressions: cabin cleanliness, acceptable; seat comfort, needs improvement; temperature, too cold in first class. These were the tangible aspects of customer experience she could easily quantify and address in future renovations. What she couldn't have anticipated was how Patricia Wilson would provide such a stark demonstration of the intangible aspects requiring immediate attention. "Champagne, sir." Patricia's voice was warm honey as she offered a flute to the white businessman across the aisle. "Or perhaps our signature mimosa to start your journey." She moved methodically through the cabin, her service cart stocked with premium beverages and warm towels. Olivia watched as Patricia lavished attention on each passenger, each white passenger. The flight attendant's smile never faltered as she described wine options, recommended cocktails, and engaged in friendly banter. Then Patricia reached Olivia's seat and the transformation was immediate. The smile vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped deficiency. "Drink?" she asked curtly. "I'd like the mimosa, please," Olivia replied pleasantly. "And a water as well." Patricia's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Without comment, she poured the champagne and orange juice mixture, placing it on Olivia's tray table with considerably less care than she'd shown other passengers. The plastic water cup followed, landing with a splash that sent droplets onto Olivia's sleeve. "Sorry," Patricia said in a tone that conveyed anything but remorse. Olivia dabbed at her sleeve with a napkin. "No problem," she responded, maintaining her composure while making another mental note. On her tablet, hidden from Patricia's view, she typed, "Service discrepancy based on apparent racial bias. First-class attendant providing markedly different service quality to black passenger." This wasn't just about documenting poor customer service. As the new owner of Horizon Airlines, Olivia was witnessing firsthand the kind of discriminatory behavior that could expose the company to lawsuits, damage its reputation, and, most importantly, cause real harm to passengers. "First time flying with us?" The question came from the passenger beside her, a man in his early 40s with kind eyes and a ready smile. He had observed the interaction with Patricia with a slight frown. "First time in a while," Olivia answered truthfully. "I'm Trevor Walton," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm a regular on this route, San Francisco twice monthly for work." "Olivia Bennett," she replied, shaking his hand. She didn't elaborate on her identity or occupation, her standard practice with strangers. "Bennett," Trevor repeated thoughtfully. "Why does that name sound familiar?" "It's a common enough name," Olivia deflected smoothly. What takes you to San Francisco so often? I'm an attorney specializing in employment and discrimination law, Trevor explained. My firm has offices on both coasts. He glanced discreetly toward Patricia, who was now laughing at something another passenger had said. I couldn't help noticing the different treatment you received. Unfortunately, I see it all too often. Olivia nodded, appreciating his awareness but not wanting to discuss it further with someone who might connect her name to her company. It happens, she said simply. As the flight progressed, Patricia's behavior grew increasingly problematic. When serving the hot towels, she practically tossed Olivia's onto her tray table while carefully placing others in passengers' hands. During the meal service, she forgot to offer Olivia the premium entree choice until only the less desirable option remained. We're out of the salmon, Patricia announced with false regret. Only the pasta left for you. Olivia noticed that a white passenger seated behind her was served salmon moments later. The most blatant incident occurred during drink refills. As Patricia leaned across to serve Trevor, she tilted the water pitcher just enough to send a stream of ice water cascading onto Olivia's lap. Oh! Patricia exclaimed with theatrical surprise. How clumsy of me. These air pockets make service so challenging. The cabin had been smooth for the past hour. Trevor immediately offered his napkin. That was no accident, he said quietly as Patricia walked away without offering assistance. Olivia dabbed at her soaked pants, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. This wasn't the first time she'd endured such treatment, though it had been years since anyone had been quite so blatant. Throughout her career, she'd learned when to confront discrimination and when to document it for more strategic action later. Today, she chose documentation. Each incident went into her notes, building a case that would eventually lead to significant changes at Horizon Airlines. As Olivia excused herself to the lavatory to attempt to dry her pants, she passed the galley where Patricia was whispering to another flight attendant while glancing in her direction. The conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed Olivia. In the confined space of the lavatory, Olivia allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought back to her early days at tech conferences, when she'd been mistaken for administrative staff rather than the CEO. She remembered the venture capitalist who had asked if she was the diversity hire when she approached his table at a networking event. She recalled the real estate agent who had tried to steer her away from expensive properties even after verifying her income. Each incident had strengthened her resolve to succeed not just for herself, but to create spaces where such treatment would be unacceptable. Now, as the owner of Horizon Airlines, she would have the power to implement systemic changes, starting with proper training for staff like Patricia Wilson. When Olivia returned to her seat, the flight was entering a period of minor turbulence. The captain's voice came over the intercom. This is Captain James Reynolds. We're experiencing some light chop as we pass over the Rockies. I've turned on the fasten seatbelt sign as a precaution, but we should be through this in about 15 minutes. Captain Reynolds was one of Horizon's most experienced pilots, a fact Olivia knew from reviewing the personnel files of senior staff before her acquisition. What she hadn't known was that Reynolds was one of the few black pilots in the airline's fleet. Shortly after the announcement, Reynolds emerged from the cockpit for a brief stretch, as was his custom on longer flights. He nodded politely to the first-class passengers, his eyes lingering momentarily on Olivia with a flicker of recognition, not of her identity, but of their shared experience as black professionals in a predominantly white industry. Everything comfortable up here? He asked the cabin generally. Most passengers nodded or murmured affirmatively. Olivia gave a small smile and said, "Yes, thank you, Captain." Patricia, who had been refreshing drinks for other passengers, stiffened noticeably at the exchange. The warm professional demeanor she'd shown the captain, one of the few colleagues she couldn't treat with the same disdain as Olivia, seemed to heighten her resentment. After Reynolds returned to the cockpit, Patricia's attitude toward Olivia grew even more hostile. She began checking seatbelts in the cabin, tugging Olivia's with unnecessary force. "Too tight?" Olivia asked calmly. Safety regulations, Patricia replied curtly. I'm just doing my job. Have you ever experienced someone treating you differently because of how you look? Comment number 1 if you've witnessed discrimination like Olivia is facing right now, or number 2 if you've been fortunate enough to avoid such treatment. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about people overcoming prejudice against all odds. Would you have remained as calm as Olivia in this situation, or would you have confronted Patricia immediately? The tension is building, but this flight attendant has no idea she's just created the biggest problem of her career. Stay tuned to see how this airborne drama escalates in the next part of our story. 2 hours into the 5-hour transcontinental flight, the smooth journey hit literal and figurative turbulence. The aircraft entered a patch of rough air, causing the fasten seatbelt sign to illuminate with a gentle chime. Captain Reynolds's voice came over the intercom, his deep baritone reassuring passengers that the bumpy conditions were nothing to worry about. Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some weather-related turbulence. Please return to your seats and keep your seatbelts fastened. Flight attendants, please suspend service and secure the cabin. Most passengers complied immediately, some gripping their armrests as the plane dipped and swayed. Olivia, who had flown frequently enough to find turbulence more inconvenient than frightening, calmly put away her tablet and secured her belongings. Patricia moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, checking that tray tables were stowed and seatbelts fastened. When she reached Olivia's row, however, her professional demeanor took a calculated detour. "Ma'am, you need to put that away," Patricia said sharply, pointing to Olivia's water bottle, which was securely placed in the seat pocket. "It's closed and secured," Olivia replied. "It needs to be stowed in your bag or held in your hand during turbulence," Patricia insisted, inventing a policy that didn't exist. Olivia glanced across the aisle where another passenger had both a water bottle and coffee cup placed identically to hers. Patricia had passed that seat without comment. "I don't see how my water bottle is any different from the ones you've allowed other passengers to keep out," Olivia observed quietly. Patricia's face hardened. "Are you questioning my authority on this aircraft?" The plane chose that moment to drop suddenly, causing several passengers to gasp. Patricia, caught off balance, stumbled against Olivia's seat. Rather than apologizing, she used the momentum to deliberately jostle Olivia's shoulder. "As I was saying, turbulence is unpredictable," Patricia continued, steadying herself with unnecessary pressure on Olivia's seat back. "Items must be properly secured." She moved away, but returned moments later, using each wave of turbulence as an excuse to bump against Olivia's seat or reach across her personal space to adjust window shades or check seatbelts that were already properly fastened. Trevor Walton had been observing these interactions with increasing concern. After Patricia's third, accidental, jostling of Olivia, he spoke up. "Excuse me," he said, his attorney's voice carrying a note of authority. "I'd appreciate if you could be more careful. You seem to be bumping into this passenger repeatedly while managing to avoid contact with everyone else." Patricia's smile turned arctic. "Sir, I'm simply doing my job during difficult conditions. Perhaps you should focus on your own comfort rather than monitoring my movements." "I'm quite comfortable," Trevor replied evenly. "I'm merely pointing out a pattern of behavior that appears targeted." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "I don't appreciate what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Trevor countered. "I'm stating an observation." Other passengers had begun to notice the exchange. An older white couple seated across the aisle exchanged uncomfortable glances. A middle-aged Asian man 2 rows ahead turned slightly in his seat, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. Patricia, now aware of the attention, shifted tactics. "Ma'am," she addressed Olivia directly, "I apologize if you feel you're receiving inadequate service. Perhaps if you weren't being so difficult, we could better attend to your needs." The accusation, that Olivia was the problem rather than the recipient of problematic treatment, was a familiar reversal tactic she had encountered throughout her career. The suggestion that legitimate concerns about unequal treatment made one difficult was textbook deflection. I haven't been difficult, Olivia stated calmly. I've simply pointed out inconsistencies in how rules are being applied. Patricia's colleague, a younger flight attendant named Sarah, had been watching from the galley with growing discomfort. She approached now, perhaps hoping to defuse the situation. Patricia, the captain's asking for an update on cabin security, she said, a transparent attempt to draw her senior colleague away from the escalating confrontation. Patricia waved her off. Tell him everything's fine except for some passenger compliance issues I'm addressing. Sarah hesitated, clearly reluctant to deliver this mischaracterization to the captain. I think he wanted to speak with you directly, she tried again. In a moment, Patricia snapped. As the turbulence began to subside, Olivia's phone vibrated with an incoming call. The screen displayed Zara Washington, her chief of staff, who would only call during a flight if something urgent required attention regarding tomorrow's keynote speech. Olivia reached for the phone, intending to send a quick text explaining she would call back once they reached smoother air. Before her fingers could touch the screen, Patricia swooped down. Cell phone use is strictly prohibited during turbulence, she declared loudly. Olivia looked pointedly at a white businessman 3 rows ahead who was actively speaking on his phone. Patricia followed her gaze but made no move to address the other passenger's identical behavior. I'm not using it, Olivia explained. I'm just sending a quick message to say I'll call back later. The rules apply to everyone, Patricia insisted, though her selective enforcement suggested otherwise. Do they? Olivia asked quietly, her calm demeanor unbroken but her patience wearing thin. A tension-filled silence stretched between them, broken only when the captain switched off the fasten seatbelt sign with a cheerful announcement that they had cleared the rough air. The confrontation might have ended there had Patricia chosen to move on. Instead, she lingered by Olivia's seat, seemingly determined to assert her authority. I'll need to see your boarding pass again, she demanded. Why? Olivia asked. You've already verified it several times. Just a routine check, Patricia claimed, though no other passengers were being subjected to this routine. Olivia reached for her handbag to retrieve the document, but Patricia's hand shot out to stop her. Wait until I tell you it's safe to move, she ordered. Trevor Walton had heard enough. This is ridiculous, he said. The seatbelt sign is off, and you're clearly singling out Ms. Bennett for treatment you're not applying to any other passenger. Several other first-class passengers were now openly watching. The older white gentleman across the aisle cleared his throat uncomfortably. Young lady, he addressed Patricia, I believe the gentleman has a point. I've been flying Horizon for 20 years, and I've never seen a flight attendant request repeated verification of a boarding pass mid-flight. Patricia flushed, not having anticipated that other passengers might side against her. Sir, with all due respect, you don't understand the security protocols we must follow. I was an airline executive for 30 years before retirement, the man replied dryly. I believe I do understand the protocols. More passengers were now engaged, the incident having crossed the threshold from uncomfortable to undeniable. Sarah, the younger flight attendant, looked mortified and retreated to inform the lead flight attendant of the situation. Patricia, finding herself increasingly isolated, doubled down rather than backing off. I'm responsible for this cabin, and if I feel something isn't right, I have a duty to investigate. And what exactly doesn't feel right to you? Olivia asked, her voice level but pointed. The question hung in the air, its implication clear to everyone listening. What was it about Olivia that Patricia found so suspicious? What was out of place about a well-dressed, articulate black woman in first class? Patricia's response was telling in its evasiveness. I don't appreciate your tone or your implication. I'm simply asking you to clarify what specific concern you have about my presence in this cabin, Olivia pressed. Since you've checked my boarding pass multiple times, served me differently than other passengers, and repeatedly invaded my personal space. Other passengers began to murmur among themselves. The Asian businessman nodded slightly in agreement with Olivia's assessment. The tension in the cabin had become palpable, a shared discomfort at witnessing such blatant discrimination. Patricia, sensing she was losing control of the narrative, attempted to reassert authority through policy. FAA regulations give flight attendants full discretion to ensure cabin safety and appropriate passenger behavior. And does that discretion include applying different standards based on a passenger's race? Trevor asked pointedly. The question electrified the cabin. Patricia's face flushed deep red, but before she could respond, the lead flight attendant, Michael, appeared at her side. "Patricia, I need you in the galley," he said firmly. Then, to Olivia and the surrounding passengers. "I apologize for any discomfort. Can I get anyone a beverage or address any concerns?" As Patricia reluctantly followed Michael to the galley, Olivia could hear their hushed but intense conversation. "What the hell are you doing?" Michael whispered harshly. "That passenger has filed no fewer than 3 complaints about your behavior in the last hour." "She's being difficult and entitled," Patricia defended herself. 3 other passengers have independently verified her account, Michael countered. "And Captain Reynolds is asking questions now too." The confrontation was building toward an inevitable climax. As Olivia sat quietly observing the whispered argument in the galley, she knew that the next phase of the flight would likely force the underlying tensions into the open. What she couldn't have predicted was just how dramatically events would unfold. Or how completely the power dynamic was about to shift. The atmosphere in first class remained charged as the flight continued over the central United States. Patricia had been temporarily relegated to serving the economy section while Michael took over first-class service, a reassignment that had done nothing to improve her mood. Olivia could feel the flight attendant's glare whenever she passed through on her way to the galley. Despite the tension, normalcy had somewhat returned to the cabin. Michael served drinks with professional courtesy to all passengers, making a point to be especially attentive to Olivia, perhaps to compensate for his colleague's behavior. "Is there anything else I can get for you, Ms. Bennett?" he asked, having introduced himself properly after the earlier confrontation. "I'm fine, thank you," Olivia replied with a genuine smile. She appreciated his efforts to correct the situation, though she knew the problem ran much deeper than one flight attendant's attitude. 3 seats ahead, Harold Whitman, a 60-something executive in an expensive suit, signaled for Michael's attention. As the flight attendant moved to assist him, Whitman's gestures became increasingly animated. He had apparently spilled red wine on his white shirt during the turbulence. "This is unacceptable," Whitman's voice carried through the cabin. "Do you know how much this shirt cost? The airline will be covering the dry cleaning bill." Michael responded with practiced diplomacy, offering club soda and a stain removal wipe while assuring the passenger that customer relations would address his concerns after landing. The commotion created a minor spectacle, with several passengers turning to watch. In the midst of this distraction, Olivia reached for her water glass. The aircraft hit a small air pocket. Nothing severe, but enough to jostle her hand. The water sloshed over the rim, creating a small puddle on her tray table. It was a minor mishap that would normally warrant nothing more than a napkin and perhaps a brief apology to anyone seated nearby who might have been splashed. But Patricia Wilson had chosen that exact moment to re-enter the first-class cabin, ostensibly to retrieve something from the forward galley. Her eyes locked on the spilled water with the intensity of a predator spotting wounded prey. "Look what she's done now," Patricia announced loudly, abandoning any pretense of professional restraint. Olivia reached for a napkin to clean up the small spill, but Patricia was already advancing toward her seat. "First you question my authority, then you create a mess for others to clean up," Patricia said, her voice rising with each word. "This is exactly the kind of behavior I've come to expect." The cabin went silent. Even Whitman stopped his complaints about his shirt to watch the unfolding scene. "It's just water," Olivia replied calmly. "I'm cleaning it up myself." "That's not the point," Patricia insisted, leaning into Olivia's personal space. "The point is the entitled attitude," the constant disruption. Trevor Walton interjected, "The only disruption in this cabin has been your targeted harassment of Ms. Bennett." Patricia whirled to face him. "Stay out of this. You've been encouraging her behavior from the start." "What behavior exactly?" Olivia asked, her voice level but firm. "Sitting in my assigned seat. Expecting the same service other passengers receive. Please, enlighten me about what I've done to warrant this treatment." It was a direct challenge, and everyone in the cabin knew it. Patricia was being called to account for her actions, forced to articulate what had really motivated her behavior. The moment stretched taut with tension. "People like you think the rules don't apply," Patricia finally said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You get a ticket for a section you don't belong in and expect everyone to bend over backward." There it was, the naked prejudice laid bare for all to witness. "People like you," and "don't belong," were phrases Olivia had heard throughout her life, coded language for racial exclusion. "I have the same right to be here as anyone else with a first-class ticket," Olivia stated. Her voice remained measured, but there was steel beneath the calm. "The only difference is how you've chosen to treat me." Patricia's face contorted with anger. "Don't lecture me about rights. I've been serving these routes for 27 years. I know who belongs and who doesn't." "Based on what criteria?" Olivia pressed. "My ticket? My behavior? Or is it something else entirely?" The implication hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Michael stepped forward from the galley, sensing the dangerous escalation. "Patricia, I need you to step back and return to your assigned section," he said firmly. "I'm handling a situation with a difficult passenger," Patricia insisted, not taking her eyes off Olivia. "The only difficult person I see is wearing a Horizon Airlines uniform," Trevor observed. Patricia's composure, already fragile, shattered completely. "You have no idea what it's like dealing with these people who think they're entitled to special treatment just because what?" Olivia interrupted, standing to her full height, her dignity intact despite the barrage. "Just because I expect to be treated with the same respect as every other passenger? Just because I refuse to accept discrimination as part of my travel experience?" Patricia's face flushed crimson. "How dare you accuse me of?" "I'm not accusing you of anything your actions haven't already demonstrated," Olivia said. "Now, I suggest you return to your duties and leave me to enjoy the remainder of my flight in peace." What happened next occurred so quickly that passengers would later give conflicting accounts to investigators. Patricia, her self-control completely abandoned, raised her hand and struck Olivia across the face with an open palm. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. Gasps erupted throughout first class. Michael froze in shock. Trevor half rose from his seat in protest. Olivia herself stood perfectly still, one hand raised to her stinging cheek, her eyes never leaving Patricia's face. For a moment, Patricia looked triumphant, as though she'd been waiting for this release. Then, as the reality of what she'd done began to register, her expression shifted to one of uncertainty. The stunned silence was broken by the appearance of Captain Reynolds, who had been alerted by a passenger using the call button during the escalating confrontation. He took in the scene with a quick, professional assessment. "What's happening here?" he demanded, his authoritative tone cutting through the tension. Before anyone could respond, the cabin erupted in overlapping explanations. "She slapped that passenger," came from the elderly gentleman across the aisle. "Unprovoked assault," Trevor stated, his legal mind already framing the incident. "I was provoked," Patricia attempted to defend herself, though her voice lacked conviction. Captain Reynolds raised a hand for silence, then addressed Olivia directly. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Olivia lowered her hand from her cheek and nodded. "Physically, yes. She's been harassing this passenger the entire flight," Trevor explained. The slap was just the culmination. Reynolds turned to Michael for confirmation. The lead flight attendant nodded gravely. I've already documented several incidents of concerning behavior prior to this. Patricia began to protest, but Reynolds cut her off with a sharp gesture. Not another word, he ordered. Then, to Olivia, ma'am, I want to assure you this behavior is absolutely contrary to Horizon Airlines policy and values. I'll need to document exactly what occurred. Olivia's response was measured and precise. I'll provide a full statement. For now, I would like Patricia's full name and employee number. Patricia blanched. Most passengers would ask to speak to a manager or demand compensation. Requesting specific employee identification suggested potential legal action. That's not. Patricia stammered. You're required to provide that information when requested, Reynolds reminded her quietly. With visible reluctance, Patricia stated her name and recited her employee number, which Olivia committed to memory with the same precision she applied to complex code or business negotiations. Thank you, Olivia said simply. Captain Reynolds, I trust this incident will be fully documented and addressed through appropriate channels. Reynolds nodded gravely. You have my word. Patricia, you're relieved of cabin duties for the remainder of this flight. Report to the crew rest area and remain there until landing. As Patricia was escorted away by Michael, her face had lost its flush of anger, replaced by the pallor of dawning comprehension. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, committed an act that could not be explained away or minimized. The first-class cabin remained hushed as passengers processed what they had witnessed. Olivia returned to her seat with the same dignity she'd maintained throughout the ordeal. She pulled out her phone, now that the aircraft had cellular connectivity, and began composing a message. The true significance of that message, and of Patricia Wilson's catastrophic error in judgment, would soon become apparent to everyone aboard Horizon Airlines Flight 1547. The balance of power was about to shift dramatically, and the consequences would extend far beyond one flight attendant's career. In the tense quiet that followed Patricia's removal from the cabin, a strange calm settled over first class. Passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances, some openly staring at Olivia as she composed a text message with remarkable composure given what had just transpired. The red mark on her cheek was beginning to fade, but the impact of the incident hung heavy in the recycled cabin air. Patricia, now sequestered in the crew rest area, initially maintained an air of indignation. She provoked me, she insisted to Michael when he checked on her. You didn't hear how she was speaking to me. I heard enough, Michael replied coolly. And so did at least a dozen witnesses, including the captain. I've given 27 years to this airline, Patricia continued, her voice quavering between defiance and dawning fear. They can't just throw me away over one incident with a difficult passenger. Michael's expression was grim. Patricia, you struck a passenger. That's grounds for immediate termination under any circumstances. She'll probably just file a complaint and ask for some free miles, Patricia said, attempting to minimize the situation. It happens all the time. This isn't going to be like the other complaints, Michael said quietly. This passenger is different. Back in first class, Trevor Walton was reviewing the video he had surreptitiously recorded on his phone during the confrontation. Despite Patricia's threats about unauthorized recording, he had captured the critical moments leading up to and including the slap. Ms. Bennett, he said, turning to Olivia, I have video documentation if you need it for any formal complaint or legal action. Olivia smiled slightly. Thank you, Mr. Walton. That may prove useful. Trevor's brow furrowed. If you don't mind my asking, who were you texting just now? An attorney? Something like that, Olivia replied enigmatically. In truth, she had sent a brief, encrypted message to her executive team, significant incident on HA 1547. Implement protocol oversight immediately. Full brief upon landing. This triggered a cascading series of actions that would soon become evident to everyone aboard. Patricia, despite her bravado, was beginning to feel the first tendrils of real anxiety. Her seniority had always protected her before. When passengers had complained about her differential treatment in the past, their concerns had been addressed with form letters and loyalty points. Management had consistently taken her side over difficult passengers. But striking a customer was different, even she recognized that line shouldn't have been crossed. Still, she comforted herself with the thought that the passenger, though clearly educated and well-spoken, probably lacked the influence to cause serious trouble. How much damage could one person really do? 20 minutes after Olivia's text, as the plane cruised over the Midwest, the cabin communication system activated with a distinctive chime. The sound was different from the usual announcements. This was the tone that preceded direct communications from Horizon's corporate headquarters to in-flight staff. Captain Reynolds's voice came over the intercom, strained with an emotion the passengers couldn't quite identify. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've just received a communication from Horizon Airlines regional management. They've requested to address our cabin directly, which is highly unusual. Please stand by." There was a brief pause, then a new voice filled the cabin, authoritative, female, and clearly accustomed to command. "This is Victoria Hargrove, Regional Director of Operations for Horizon Airlines Western Division. I've been made aware of a serious incident aboard Flight 1547. First, I want to extend our deepest apologies to the passenger involved. What you experienced is completely unacceptable and contrary to everything Horizon Airlines stands for." Passengers exchanged surprised glances. Corporate management rarely intervened in in-flight situations in real time. The flight attendant involved has been immediately suspended pending full investigation. Captain Reynolds has my authorization to take all necessary steps to ensure the comfort and safety of all passengers for the remainder of the flight. Upon landing, I would like to personally meet with the affected passenger. Olivia listened impassively, her face revealing nothing. Additionally, Victoria Hargrove continued, all passengers on today's flight will receive full refunds and additional compensation for witnessing this disturbing incident. We at Horizon Airlines are committed to creating an environment of respect and dignity for all passengers, regardless of race, gender, religion, or background. What occurred today represents a failure of that commitment, and we take full responsibility. As the announcement concluded, Patricia, listening from the crew rest area, felt the blood drain from her face. Regional directors didn't get involved in routine customer service issues. Something was very wrong. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds received a private follow-up communication that caused him to actually remove his headset and stare at the message in disbelief. After a moment, he replaced the headset and acknowledged receipt of the information, his voice carefully neutral despite his shock. Reynolds had been with Horizon for 15 years and had never seen corporate react with such speed and decisiveness to an in-flight incident. The message had included one detail not shared with the passengers: the identity of the woman Patricia had slapped. The captain left the first officer in command and made his way back to the first-class cabin. He approached Olivia's seat with a new demeanor, not just the professional concern he'd shown earlier, but something approaching deference. "Ms. Bennett," he said quietly, "I've just been informed of your connection to our airline. I want to personally assure you that what happened today is being addressed at the highest levels." Olivia nodded slightly but offered no elaboration. She had no desire to announce her ownership of the airline to the entire cabin. This wasn't about public embarrassment for Patricia or a show of power for herself, it was about documenting systemic issues that required correction. Trevor Walton, observing this interaction with keen interest, put together the pieces faster than most. As an attorney who handled corporate discrimination cases, he was well versed in recognizing when someone possessed unusual influence. "You're not just any passenger, are you?" he asked softly when the captain had returned to the cockpit. Olivia considered him thoughtfully before responding. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in ensuring Horizon Airlines provides equal service to all its passengers." Throughout her career, Olivia had faced countless moments when her abilities were questioned, her accomplishments minimized, her presence challenged, simply because of her race. She had learned to choose her battles carefully, to document injustices methodically, and to use her growing influence to create systemic change rather than seeking personal vindication. Today's incident would become leverage for implementing comprehensive anti-discrimination training and accountability systems throughout Horizon's operations. Patricia Wilson was merely a symptom of a larger problem, one that Olivia now had both the evidence and authority to address. In the crew area, Michael returned with news that left Patricia ashen-faced. "They're saying we need to prepare a full incident report before landing, with statements from all crew members who witnessed any part of your interactions with Ms. Bennett." "Why?" Patricia demanded, her voice rising with panic. "Who is she?" Michael hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure, but based on HQ's reaction, she's someone with significant influence. The regional director doesn't personally call the plane for just anyone. That's discrimination too." Patricia protested, missing the irony of her complaint. "Treating her specially because of who she might know." Michael fixed her with a level stare. "No, Patricia. What you did was discrimination. What's happening now is consequence. Have you ever witnessed someone suddenly realize they completely misjudged a situation? Comment number 1 if you've seen a power dynamic shift like this in real life, or number 2 if you think Patricia deserves what's coming to her. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see more stories of justice served in unexpected ways. What would you do if you were in Olivia's position? Would you publicly reveal your power, or handle things quietly behind the scenes? The aftermath of this confrontation is about to unfold in ways that will transform an entire airline. Stay tuned to see how this shocking story continues. As Horizon Airlines Flight 1547 began its initial descent into San Francisco International Airport, the mood in first class remained subdued. Regular service had resumed under Michael's supervision, though passengers seemed more interested in discussing the dramatic confrontation than enjoying their complimentary beverages. Olivia sat quietly, reviewing her keynote presentation for tomorrow's conference while occasionally making notes about the incident. She had spent her career turning obstacles into opportunities, and today would be no different. What Patricia Wilson had intended as an assertion of power over someone she deemed inferior would instead become the catalyst for meaningful change throughout the organization. Through her cabin window, Olivia could see the fog-shrouded Bay Area coming into view. A landscape of innovation and progress that had both embraced her brilliance and, at times, reminded her of the persistent barriers facing Black women in tech. San Francisco represented the duality of American ambition, a place where meritocracy and prejudice often existed side by side. The captain's voice interrupted her reflections. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach into San Francisco International Airport. Local time is 11:23 a.m., and the temperature is a pleasant 68 degrees. We've been instructed to taxi to a special arrival gate where ground personnel will meet the aircraft. We ask that all passengers remain seated upon landing until further instructions are provided." The unusual announcement prompted murmurs throughout the cabin. Special arrival gates were typically reserved for security concerns or VIP passengers. "What's happening?" a passenger asked Michael as he passed. "Just following protocol," he replied diplomatically, though his eyes flickered toward Olivia. In the crew rest area, Patricia was frantically searching her phone for information about Olivia Bennett. 27 years of airline experience had taught her to recognize when her job was in jeopardy, and every instinct told her this situation was unprecedented. The regional director's direct intervention, the special arrival gate, the captain's deference. All pointed to a passenger with extraordinary influence. Her Google search returned millions of results. The first page showed images of a poised Black woman accepting awards, speaking at conferences, and being featured on the covers of business magazines. The headlines told a story Patricia was only beginning to comprehend. Bennett Technologies CEO named among most influential women in tech. Olivia Bennett's Translate Now revolutionizes global communication, from Harlem to Silicon Valley. The remarkable journey of Olivia Bennett, tech billionaire, remains grounded despite astronomical success. Patricia's hand trembled as she scrolled, her breathing becoming shallow. Billionaire. CEO. Tech pioneer. The woman she had harassed, belittled, and ultimately struck was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in America. But it was the most recent news item that caused her phone to slip from her fingers. Bennett Acquisitions completes purchase of Horizon Airlines in quiet deal. Dated just 3 weeks ago, the article detailed how Bennett's holding company had acquired the struggling airline with plans for modernization and improved customer experience. The purchase had been conducted through intermediate corporations to avoid market speculation, with most Horizon employees still unaware of their new owner. Patricia felt the aircraft begin its descent as the full magnitude of her error crashed down upon her. She hadn't just assaulted a passenger. She had slapped the woman who owned the entire airline. The woman who could, with a word, end not just her job but her entire career. As the plane touched down on the runway with the gentle bump of rubber meeting concrete, Patricia Wilson buried her face in her hands. From the flight deck, Captain Reynolds guided the aircraft toward a remote gate where a small welcome committee was already assembled on the tarmac. Through the cockpit windows, he could see several figures in Horizon Airlines executive attire standing alongside airport security personnel. This was no ordinary reception. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reynolds announced as the aircraft taxied to its position, "we have arrived at our designated gate. As mentioned earlier, we've been asked to follow special deplaning procedures today. All passengers are requested to remain seated until further instructions. Thank you for your cooperation." The seatbelt sign remained illuminated as the aircraft came to a complete stop. Ground crew positioned the jet bridge with efficient precision. Unlike the usual procedure where the door would open immediately after docking, there was a pause as the assembled executives apparently waited for clearance. Inside the cabin, passengers craned their necks to peer through windows, curious about the unusual reception. Several had their phones out, sensing that something newsworthy was unfolding. "Is that the police?" someone asked, noticing the airport security officers. "I think those are airline executives," another passenger replied. "See the uniforms?" Olivia remained composed, gathering her belongings methodically. She had not intended for her identity to be revealed during this flight. Her preference had always been to observe operations anonymously, but Patricia's actions had forced her hand. Now, the incident would necessarily become more public than she would have chosen. The cabin door finally opened. Instead of the usual ground crew, a distinguished man in his early 60s entered the aircraft. William Chen, Senior Vice President of Operations for Horizon Airlines, scanned the first-class cabin briefly before his eyes locked on Olivia. His face registered recognition and respect as he approached her seat. "Ms. Bennett," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed cabin, "on behalf of Horizon Airlines, your airline. I want to personally apologize for the inexcusable experience you've had today." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin as passengers processed this revelation. "Your airline." The implication was unmistakable. Trevor Walton, seated beside Olivia, couldn't suppress a small smile of vindication. "I knew you weren't just any passenger," he murmured. Olivia acknowledged Chen with professional courtesy. "Thank you, William. We'll discuss appropriate responses back at headquarters. For now, let's ensure all passengers can deplane efficiently." Chen nodded, then turned to address the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the unusual arrival procedure today. As some of you may have gathered, we've had the unexpected honor of having Olivia Bennett, the owner of Horizon Airlines, aboard this flight. In light of the unfortunate incident that occurred, we're implementing special procedures to document what happened and address it appropriately." Murmurs spread through the cabin as passengers connected the dots between the discriminatory treatment they had witnessed and the revelation of Olivia's identity. "All passengers will be able to deplane momentarily," Chen continued. "Those who witnessed the incident may be asked if they're willing to provide brief statements. This is entirely voluntary, and we appreciate your cooperation." As Chen stepped back to confer with his team, all eyes in the cabin turned toward Olivia. The woman who had endured Patricia's harassment with such dignity was not just any passenger but the actual owner of the airline. The irony was not lost on anyone present. In the crew rest area, Patricia had heard Chen's announcement through the cabin monitoring system. The confirmation of what she had read online, that Olivia Bennett now owned Horizon Airlines, landed like a physical blow. She collapsed into a jump seat, her career flashing before her eyes. Michael appeared at the crew area entrance. "They're asking for you," he said simply. Patricia nodded numbly, rising on unsteady legs. As she moved through the empty economy cabin toward the front of the plane, she felt as though she were walking to her own professional execution. When she reached first class, Patricia found it nearly empty. Most passengers had already deplaned, but Olivia Bennett remained seated, reviewing something on her tablet. William Chen stood nearby, along with Captain Reynolds and two individuals Patricia recognized from Human Resources. Patricia had imagined this moment would involve shouting, accusations, perhaps even public humiliation. Instead, what she encountered was something far more devastating. Olivia Bennett looked up from her tablet, met Patricia's eyes with calm dignity, and then returned to her work without a word. The message was clear: Patricia wasn't even worth addressing personally anymore. "Ms. Wilson," Chen said formally, "you're being placed on administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct a full investigation into today's events. Please surrender your company identification and proceed with these representatives from Human Resources who will explain the next steps." Patricia fumbled with her ID badge, her hands trembling visibly. I didn't know who she was," she stammered, as if this somehow mitigated her actions. Chen's expression hardened. "That's precisely the problem, Ms. Wilson. It shouldn't matter who she is. Every passenger deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their position or influence." As Patricia was escorted from the aircraft, her career in tatters, Olivia finally stood to deplane. The remaining passengers and crew watched in respectful silence as the woman who had just demonstrated the most powerful lesson of all, that true authority requires neither cruelty nor intimidation, walked calmly toward the exit. The power shift was complete, but for Olivia Bennett, this was only the beginning of the real work ahead. The terminal at San Francisco International Airport buzzed with unusual activity as Olivia Bennett emerged from the jet bridge. Airport security had established a perimeter to manage the small crowd that had already gathered. News travels fast in the age of social media, and passengers from Flight 1547 had been tweeting and posting about the incident since before landing. Patricia Wilson was escorted through a separate exit, her face ashen as she clutched her personal belongings in a Horizon Airlines tote bag. Two Human Resources representatives flanked her, their expressions professionally neutral but their posture making it clear this was not a friendly escort. As they approached the terminal exit, Patricia caught sight of several news vans parked outside. "Are those here because of what happened?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Ms. Wilson, we advise you not to speak with any media representatives," the senior HR manager replied. "The company will issue an official statement regarding the incident." The realization that her actions would become public knowledge, that friends, family, and potential future employers would know what she had done, seemed to hit Patricia with physical force. Her shoulders slumped as security guided her toward a private exit to avoid the press. Meanwhile, Olivia was escorted to the Horizon Airlines Premium Lounge, which had been cleared of other passengers to provide privacy. William Chen had assembled an emergency response team including the airline's general counsel, head of public relations, chief diversity officer, and several board members who had been hastily called to the airport. "Ms. Bennett, words cannot express how deeply sorry we are for what occurred today," Chen began as the door closed behind them. Olivia raised a hand to pause his apology. "William, I appreciate the sentiment, but I didn't buy this airline to receive special treatment. I bought it because I saw an opportunity to transform a struggling carrier into an industry leader, not just in profitability but in corporate culture and customer experience." She set her tablet on the conference table and activated a presentation. Today's incident, while personally unpleasant, has provided invaluable first-hand insight into issues that data alone couldn't fully convey. I've documented multiple instances of discriminatory behavior occurring before the physical assault. The executives exchanged uncomfortable glances as Olivia methodically presented her observations, from the check-in counter's subtle hostility to Patricia's escalating discrimination during the flight. This isn't about one flight attendant, Olivia continued. Patricia Wilson is a symptom of systemic issues that require comprehensive attention. Her personnel file, which I reviewed this morning during the flight, shows 7 previous complaints from passengers of color, none of which resulted in meaningful disciplinary action. The head of Human Resources, Janet Foster, looked particularly discomfited by this revelation. Ms. Bennett, I wasn't aware you had accessed those records. As the owner of this company, I have both the right and responsibility to understand our personnel practices, Olivia replied evenly. Especially when they reveal patterns of overlooked discrimination. Before the discussion could continue, there was a knock at the lounge door. A PR assistant entered and whispered something to Marissa Chong, the head of public relations. Ms. Bennett, Chong said with evident concern, the incident has gone viral. Multiple passengers uploaded videos of the confrontation, and they're spreading rapidly across social media platforms. We have press inquiries from major networks, and #HorizonSlap is trending nationally. Olivia nodded, unsurprised. We won't hide from this. It's an opportunity for transparency and accountability. Do you want to press criminal charges against Ms. Wilson? Asked Jonathan Rivera, the general counsel. You would have strong grounds for assault. Olivia considered the question carefully before responding. No. Legal charges would focus attention on the individual rather than addressing the systemic issues. I'm more interested in corporate accountability and meaningful change. As if on cue, the lounge door opened again to admit Trevor Walton, who had been invited to join the meeting at Olivia's request. Ms. Bennett, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for including me. I believe I have information that might be useful to your team. Everyone, Olivia addressed the room, this is Trevor Walton. He witnessed the entire incident and, as it happens, is a partner at Walton, Diaz and Freeman, one of the country's leading civil rights law firms. Trevor nodded to the assembled executives, whose expressions ranged from surprise to alarm. The presence of a prominent civil rights attorney suggested potential legal exposure far beyond a single incident. I want to be clear, Trevor began, I'm not here to threaten litigation. Ms. Bennett has impressed me with her commitment to addressing the root causes rather than simply punishing the individual. However, I do have documentation that may help you understand the scope of the problem. He opened his laptop and displayed a folder of video clips. I've been a frequent flyer with Horizon for years, and I've observed, and documented, numerous instances of differential treatment based on race. Nothing as egregious as today's incident, but a clear pattern nonetheless. The executives watched in silence as Trevor played several clips showing subtle but unmistakable disparities in how flight attendants, including Patricia Wilson, treated passengers of different races. This isn't isolated to Patricia Wilson or even to your airline, Trevor explained. But it represents a pervasive issue that requires deliberate, sustained effort to address. Olivia turned to Janet Foster. I'd like to see the records of all discrimination training that Ms. Wilson has completed. Foster tapped rapidly on her tablet, then looked up with visible discomfort. It appears she received the standard diversity orientation when hired 27 years ago, and, she seems to have been repeatedly excused from the updated training sessions implemented 5 years ago. Excused by whom? Olivia asked sharply. Foster scrolled through the records. Her direct supervisor approved exemptions based on scheduling conflicts. She was supposed to complete the modules online instead, but there's no record that she ever did. Chen looked stricken. This is a serious oversight. The updated training was mandatory for all customer-facing staff. Yet a senior flight attendant somehow avoided it entirely, Olivia observed. and continued to interact with passengers while harboring obvious biases that eventually escalated to physical assault. The gravity of the situation settled over the room. This wasn't just about Patricia Wilson anymore, it was about a failure of oversight, accountability, and organizational commitment to the values Horizon claimed to uphold. Outside the lounge, the terminal had become a hive of media activity. Local news crews had set up for live broadcasts, while passengers from the flight were giving interviews about what they had witnessed. Social media engagement was exploding, with the incident sparking wider conversations about discrimination in the airline industry and American society at large. Back in the lounge, Olivia had moved from assessment to action. "Here's what happens next," she said, her tone making it clear this was a directive, not a suggestion. "First, we issue a statement acknowledging what occurred and taking full responsibility as an organization. No minimizing, no equivocating." Marissa Chong nodded, already drafting language on her tablet. "Second, effective immediately, we implement a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior by any Horizon employee. This includes mandatory reporting of observed incidents by colleagues, with whistleblower protections for those who come forward." Jonathan Rivera made notes on legal implementation while Janet Foster looked increasingly concerned about the sweeping changes. "Third, we conduct a comprehensive audit of all discrimination complaints filed against Horizon personnel over the past 5 years. I want to know how many were substantiated, what actions were taken, and whether there are patterns involving specific employees or routes." William Chen winced slightly at the scope of this directive but nodded his agreement. Finally, Olivia continued, "We use this incident as the foundation for a company-wide transformation. I didn't acquire Horizon simply to maintain the status quo. I intend to build an airline that sets the industry standard for equitable treatment, exceptional service, and employee accountability." As the executives processed these directives, Olivia's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Zara Washington, her chief of staff. "Excuse me," Olivia said, stepping away from the table. "I need to take this." "Liv," Zara's voice came through, tense with concern, "I've been monitoring the situation. Are you alright?" "I'm fine," Olivia assured her. "Physically, at least. The situation is being addressed." "It's everywhere," Zara reported. "Every major news outlet is covering it. Your keynote tomorrow at Tech Forward is now the hottest ticket in Silicon Valley. They've had to move it to the main convention center to accommodate the demand." Olivia hadn't considered how this incident would affect her scheduled appearance. The speech was supposed to be about our new AI ethics platform. "It still can be," Zara said thoughtfully. "But now you have a powerful real-world example of why unbiased systems and processes matter. This incident perfectly illustrates why your work is so important." As Olivia contemplated this connection, Trevor approached with a suggestion. "Ms. Bennett," he said quietly, "I believe this situation presents an opportunity beyond just fixing Horizon Airlines. You have the platform and the moral authority to address transportation discrimination more broadly. My firm would be honored to partner with your foundation on a transportation equity initiative." Olivia considered the suggestion. Throughout her career, she had leveraged challenges into opportunities for meaningful change. Today's humiliating incident could become the catalyst for industry-wide transformation. "Let's discuss it further," she agreed. "But first, we need to finish addressing the immediate situation." As she rejoined the executive team, Olivia Bennett was already shifting her focus from what had happened to what would happen next. Patricia Wilson had created a problem, but Olivia would create a solution, one that would extend far beyond a single flight or airline. The consequences of that slap would continue to unfold in ways Patricia could never have imagined when she decided that a black woman didn't belong in first class. 6 months after the incident that became known in corporate circles as the slap heard around the industry, Olivia Bennett stood at the podium in Horizon Airlines' newly renovated training center. Before her sat the inaugural class of the company's Enhanced Equity in Service program, 200 flight attendants, gate agents, and customer service representatives selected from across the airline's network. When I acquired Horizon Airlines last year, Olivia began, her voice carrying clearly through the state-of-the-art facility. I didn't just buy airplanes and routes. I invested in people and potential. I saw an opportunity to transform not just a company, but an industry's approach to equity and inclusion. The training center itself symbolized the changes Horizon had undergone. Where once stood outdated simulators and classroom space now gleamed a modern learning environment designed to foster empathy and understanding. Interactive scenarios, virtual reality simulations of challenging passenger interactions, and evidence-based curriculum had replaced the perfunctory diversity training of the past. 6 months ago, I experienced firsthand what happens when unconscious bias goes unchecked and unchallenged, Olivia continued. What began as a deeply unpleasant personal experience has evolved into something much more significant, a catalyst for change that extends beyond our company to the entire transportation sector. In the front row sat Patricia Wilson. Her presence surprised many who knew the story. After her suspension and the subsequent investigation, Patricia had been terminated from Horizon Airlines, an outcome that surprised no one. What few expected was what happened next. Rather than fading into obscurity or becoming a cautionary tale, Patricia had embarked on a journey of genuine reckoning with her biases. She had approached Olivia through intermediaries, not seeking reinstatement but offering a sincere apology and asking how she might make amends. Olivia, always focused on systemic change rather than individual punishment, had proposed an unexpected path. Patricia would work at the Horizon Community Center in Oakland, a nonprofit funded by Bennett Foundation that provided transportation assistance, job training, and community services to underserved neighborhoods. For 6 months, Patricia had worked alongside the very communities she had previously prejudged. She had listened to their stories, learned about the systemic barriers they faced, and gradually dismantled her own biases through direct experience and education. Today, she sat in the training center not as an employee seeking reinstatement, but as a cautionary example and voice of transformation. She would share her story with each new class of trainees, how unconscious bias had destroyed her career and how confronting that bias had transformed her understanding. Across the industry, Olivia's response to the incident had created ripples of change. The Passenger Equity Alliance, founded in partnership with Trevor Walton's law firm, had established industry-wide standards for non-discriminatory service that were being adopted by major carriers worldwide. Horizon's comprehensive anti-bias training program had become the gold standard, with other airlines sending representatives to learn from their approach. Olivia had used her platform at the Tech Forward conference to connect her experience on Flight 1547 to the larger issues of bias in technology and society. Her keynote speech, Algorithms and Attitudes, addressing bias in systems both digital and human, had gone viral, further cementing her reputation as a leader who understood how technological innovation and social progress must advance together. The lesson of Flight 1547 isn't just about one flight attendant or one passenger, Olivia told the trainees now. It's about the systems that allow bias to persist unchallenged, and our collective responsibility to dismantle those systems. It's about recognizing that true excellence in service can only exist when every customer is treated with equal dignity and respect. As she concluded her remarks, Olivia reflected on the transformation that had occurred since that painful slap 6 months earlier. What Patricia had intended as an assertion of power had instead become the catalyst for an industry-wide reckoning with its treatment of passengers of color. Our journey isn't complete, Olivia acknowledged. Creating truly equitable systems requires ongoing vigilance and commitment. But today, as I look at all of you, the front line of our company's interaction with the public, I see the foundation of something remarkable. You have the power to ensure that every passenger who boards our aircraft feels valued, respected, and welcome. After the formal presentation, Olivia and Patricia found themselves momentarily alone in a quiet corner of the reception area. For the first time since the incident, they stood face to face without intermediaries. I want to thank you, Patricia said, her voice steady but humble. Not for giving me another chance, I didn't deserve that, but for helping me see what I couldn't or wouldn't see before. Olivia studied the woman who had once struck her in anger. The transformation was evident not just in Patricia's words but in her bearing, the defensive hostility replaced by reflective humility. "We all have blind spots, Patricia," Olivia replied. "The difference is in how we respond when they're exposed. You could have retreated into bitterness or denial. Instead, you chose the harder path of growth and accountability." Patricia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'll never fully understand the harm I caused, not just to you that day, but to countless passengers over the years. All I can do now is try to prevent others from making the same mistakes." As they parted ways, Olivia thought about the speech she would deliver at next week's tech conference, where she would unveil Bennett Technology's newest innovation, an AI system designed to detect and mitigate bias in customer service interactions across industries. The algorithm had been refined using anonymized data from the Horizon Airlines transformation, creating a virtuous cycle of improvement. What had begun with a shocking display of prejudice had evolved into a powerful engine for change, proof that even the most painful experiences could, with the right leadership and perspective, become opportunities to build something better than what had come before. Olivia Bennett's story teaches us that true power lies not in dominance, but in dignity. When faced with discrimination, she chose documentation over drama, strategy over spectacle. By maintaining her composure while systematically addressing the injustice she experienced, she created change that extended far beyond personal vindication. The incident reminds us that racism often reveals more about the perpetrator than the target. Patricia's assumptions, based solely on skin color, blinded her to the reality of who stood before her. Meanwhile, Olivia's response demonstrates that addressing systemic racism requires changing structures, not just punishing individuals. Perhaps most powerful is the reminder that position and wealth shouldn't determine how we treat others. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of status. The transformation came not from Olivia's title or resources, but from her commitment to turning an ugly moment into meaningful reform. The story challenges us all. Will we use our influence, whatever its scope, to confront bias and create more equitable spaces? Will we recognize, like Olivia, that lasting change requires both personal dignity and structural transformation? Have you ever witnessed discrimination in action, or experienced it yourself? How did you respond? Share your story in the comments below. We can all learn from each other's experiences with confronting bias and standing up for equality. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the impact of casual racism and the power of dignified resistance. Thank you for joining us for this journey of transformation. Remember, change begins with awareness but only succeeds through action. Until next time, keep standing tall in your truth, just like Olivia Bennett.